Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks. On Wednesday, the 7th day of March, year of our Lord 2018, welcome to the John Moore Show. Okay, proper tip of the day. I want to encourage all of you to maintain your situational awareness. Maintain your situational awareness. That would mean the area immediately around you, obviously, your home, if you're walking about in public, but it also means that your community that you live in, your state, and of course your country. And we'll talk more about that. The breaking news is apparently President Trump's economic advisor, Mr. Cohn, has resigned. Mr. Cohn is formerly a high-level executive with Goldman Sachs and disagreed with the president's putting tariffs on aluminium, as the British would say, and steel being imported aluminium and imported steel, which I think is a good thing. It's a matter of national security to have both those industries be viable American-based industries. It is certainly a matter of national security. I've been told that I'm not sure we even still have one foundry that can cast the turret for a tank. We may have one left. 70 years ago, we had quite a few foundries capable of casting the turret for a tank. That's a big chunk of steel, by the way. Okay, we're going to have open lines this first hour. Professor McCanny will not be with us. The second hour, we hope to have my friend Jeff Nyquist, and we'll be talking about geopolitical matters as it relates to the international commerce conspiracy. The call number is 800-313-9443. Situational awareness. Well, some people obviously have a better situational awareness than others. Other people on one end of the spectrum, they may go out in public, and I see this a lot. You probably do also, wearing earbuds, listening to, well, whatever they're listening to. It could be most anything, couldn't it? Your two main senses when you're out and about are your vision and your hearing. That's your two main senses in terms of situational awareness, knowing if there's any threats, so forth. Cutting out one half of that equation, your hearing, by wearing earbuds, well, that's just simply not wise, is it? So when you're growing up, typically we develop a sense of situational awareness, and it's going to be different things for different people. I know I had my situation, you had yours. But I know when I found myself in combat in Vietnam, my situational awareness became quite intense, to say the least. There's always a certain level of awareness when you're in combat. 98% of the time when you're in combat, there's not much going on except routine matters, taking care of business, the job you may have, and so forth. But the 2% when there's combat, obviously, your situational awareness is ramped up to full speed, with tachyphrenia probably kicked in as well. I recall when I was first assigned to my unit in Vietnam, all the enlisted men had to take their turn pulling guard duty. We didn't have enough guys to spread it out more than every other night because of our limitations on manpower. So every other night I pulled guard duty. And we had 3 different guard posts, one of which included patrolling outside the wire. Now, you veterans out there know what I'm talking about. Outside the wire means you're on your own, baby. If you're by yourself, you really are on your own, and that's the way it was there. It was a short patrol. Started out going out the main gate to our little compound, our building that we had, which is in a city, by the way, the largest city in the Mekong Delta, Can-Tho. That's C-A-N-T-H-O. At the time, a city of about 1 million people, which is now a city of about 2 million, I believe. and walk outside the main gate, walk up the street, maybe 75 feet or so, to the first alley. And when I say alley, we're talking about an alley maybe 6 feet wide, not big enough for a motor vehicle, but big enough for people to walk back and forth and have a bicycle or a little motor scooter, something like that. Turn down that alley, walk about 100, 125 feet to the next alley, which went behind our building. Patrol down that another 60 or 70 feet, and turn around and reverse the process. So you're by yourself. It's nighttime. It's Vietnam. It's combat zone. What are you doing? Well, you're keeping your eyes and ears alert. You're told that you need to be alert for tripwires, which would be a thin piece of black wire or a thin piece of black thread, maybe 6 inches above the ground or so. Could be any height, really. And if you fail to see that, now it's not completely dark. There's ambient lighting from the street lights and lights in people's homes and so forth. Not a lot of light, but some light. So you're looking for those tripwires, looking for anything that shouldn't be there. These alleys are kept clean and neat with no debris around or anything of that nature, so it's easy to spot anything that shouldn't be there. At the same time, you're looking for any threats in the form of Viet Cong who might be hiding in the shadows, up on a rooftop, behind a door, behind a window, whatever it might be, behind a motor vehicle. And you walk very carefully, very slowly. Now, one of the tricks we developed was to take a piece of string about 4 feet long and tie a small weight at the bottom, something that didn't weigh a whole lot, didn't have to weigh a whole lot. In fact, you didn't want it to weigh a whole lot. Maybe the weight of a pack of cigarettes, something fairly light at one end, and the other end is tied to the barrel of your M14 or your M1 carbine or your Thompson, whatever you got. And you walk with that in front of you, slowly, with that little weight just an inch or two off the ground. The plan is to see the string that you're holding touch the tripwire without putting enough force against it to activate the booby trap, and then back off before it explodes. So that's what we did when we were walking patrol at night alone in Vietnam. We would have that little piece of string, low tech. This is really low tech. That little piece of string hanging from the muzzle of our rifle, and hopefully detect and come across the tripwire before we tripped the booby trap. Now, that's a pretty heightened state of awareness, situational awareness. I think you'd have to all agree. Another aspect of this was every morning I typically had a Jeep assigned for my personal use because I had to travel all about town, picking up and dropping off classified documents and cash and things like that. But our vehicles were not secured at night. They were parked in the street in front of our building. So I'd go out to the Jeep. These military Jeeps had a couple of clamps on each side of the hood to hold it down to secure it. First thing I'd do would walk all around the Jeep carefully without touching it, looking every place I could think to look for anything that shouldn't be there. Next, I would carefully remove the clamps on each side of the hood and then lift the hood up about an inch or so and see if I could see anything. Lift it up another couple of inches, still carefully looking for anything that shouldn't be there. And finally, lift the hood all the way up to do a careful inspection underneath the hood to see any wires or any objects that uh, are there that should not be there. We paid particular attention to the gas tank. The gas tank on these old military Jeeps was directly underneath the driver's seat. And we learned the hard way before I got there that the Viet Cong would take a hand grenade, wrap electrical tape around the spoon, or some people may call it the handle, we call it the spoon, and then several wrappings, and pull the pin. Of course, the tape would hold it in place. Then drop the hand grenade inside the tank. Now, the more wraps of tape there was, the longer it would take for the adhesive to dissolve and the spoon to release and explode the hand grenade inside the tank of fuel, of gasoline. The countermeasure was to secure the tank with the fuel tank with padlocks, so that that would not be, at least not easily be possible. They would have to cut the padlock off, put the grenade in there, and put a second padlock on there in its place to make it look like it hadn't been tampered with, which, to my knowledge, they weren't doing that, but they could have done that. That would have been a very unhappy day, to say the least. Riding or walking in the streets of Vietnam meant you were always at risk. 360 degrees. Left, right, behind you, in front of you, always at risk of a Viet Cong terrorist who might want to cause you harm with a knife, a hand grenade, a pistol, typically not rifles. The terrorists usually didn't use rifles or submachine guns because they couldn't conceal them. We had one young man, a young Viet Cong. He walked past our compound and tossed a hand grenade through an opening in the security fence and ran off. One of our guys, a gentleman from the south side of Chicago, blasted away at him with an M14 and missed, and then a South Vietnamese police officer shot and killed the young terrorist towards the end of the street. In the meantime, our first sergeant got pretty excited, and he he ran down the hallway, kicking this grenade in front of him, yelling "grenade" the whole way down the hallway. The grenade stopped at the wall, and he made an abrupt left and kept running. It turned out the grenade didn't go off. So we evacuated that part of the building. Somebody placed a deuce-and-a-half tire and wheel up against it so that if it did go off, it would cause the least amount of damage. And then the EOD people with the MPs came and recovered it. It was a World War II hand grenade that was defective. Thank goodness it was defective. Thank goodness. Your situational awareness here in the States, well, you're going to have different situations depending on where you are, who you are. Most people spend the majority of their time either at home or at work. They may have other activities they engage in, such as going to church or school, shopping, maybe social or athletic events. And your situational awareness is going to vary depending on who you are, where you are, what you're doing, and so forth. You should always maintain a certain level of situational awareness, even at home in bed, where you should be. This should be the safest and most secure place that you have, at home in bed, resting. Even under those conditions, you need to be ready to respond to the smoke detector going off, to somebody breaking in your kitchen door at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it might be. Whatever it might be. The sound of breaking glass, the sound of a car door, if you live in an area where there shouldn't be car doors being closed in the middle of the night because your home is somewhat isolated from other homes. A car door being closed in the middle of the night is a very distinctive sound. And be ready to respond instantly and appropriately. Instantly and appropriately. Home invasions are happening all over the country, in rich neighborhoods, middle-class neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods. It doesn't matter where you are. Home invasions can and will happen almost anywhere, anytime. It's a scary thing. about as scary as anything can be to have one or more criminals enter your home while you're in there. It's a good time to be armed, don't you think? I think so. It's a good time to have a firearm that you're trained to use, ready to use it, and prepared to do what you need to do to defend innocent human life. Now, in most states, you're not allowed to use deadly force to protect property. In most states, most of the time. I can't speak to the laws of all 50 states. I'm trained to teach people in Missouri state law. But in most states, most of the time, you cannot use deadly force to protect property. The example I give in my pistol class is the following example. I say, ladies and gentlemen, if you hear the dogs barking in the middle of the night, you wake up and you see somebody stealing your tractor from your barn on the other side of the yard, you can't lay your 30-30 out the kitchen window and blow them away. You can't do that. And there's some snickers and laughters among my students, and they sometimes there'll be a comment, something like, gee, John, why can't I? Well, you can't. You can't. Now, most men, and I think probably most women as well, are going to be outraged to know that somebody is attempting to steal their private property. They're going to want to stop them and hold them for the police. The difference between stopping them and holding for the police and using deadly force is squeezing the trigger. So if you do confront the criminal, and most police officials advise not doing that, by the way, that's what they're told to do. They don't want you to confront the criminal. They want you to observe and report and let the criminal go. Now, there's no legal reason why you need to do that. It's that I'm aware of. There could be in some states. But it is what police officers and sheriffs typically tell the residents, is to observe and report and let the criminal go. Here's our break. The call number is 800-313-9443. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 7th of March. If you plan on seeing me speak at the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas later this month, if you want a discount, go to my website, libertyman.com, scroll down to the Hear the Watchman banner, very colorful banner there. Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas, Texas, March 22nd to the 25th. I will be the keynote speaker on Saturday, the 24th. There's a code there for a promotion code for the discount. Just use that to get $20 off the admission price. If you can't attend in person, there's 20% off the live stream version. So that's right there at my website at libertyman.com. We're talking about situational awareness here. what it is, how to develop it, how to make use of it. If you've got a question or comment about situational awareness, give us a call at 800-313-9443. So your situational awareness will change as you work on it. It will improve. It will become part of who you are. That's what it will do. It will become part of who you are, and it will serve you quite well. Now, there's a difference between a proper level of situational awareness and being paranoid. I've seen people paralyzed by fear or paranoia. They're basically synonyms, aren't they? And that serves nobody any purpose. It doesn't. So I don't advocate people live a life of fear. Far from it. Far from it. I advocate people develop situational awareness, develop appropriate habits, develop appropriate ways of dealing with perceived threats, and live their life. Seriously, live your life. Now, I've confronted criminals many times in my life, and people who pose threats. Going back to Vietnam, we had a young woman, the daughter of a South Vietnamese soldier, a sergeant. She and her mother lived right next door to us, and she did some work for us, some housekeeping work. And she also worked at the Army airfield outside of town, 2 or 3 miles, which was her main job. Young woman, I think she was about 17 or so. But she would catch the bus to ride out there in the morning, and it was before dawn, right at the very end of curfew is when she would catch her bus at the bus stop. And she approached me one day and said, John, I'm getting my lunch. These cowboys, we called the street thugs in Vietnam, the young Vietnamese males who were committing petty crimes. We called them cowboys. She said these cowboys are stealing my lunch money. They basically confront her, and they've been stealing her lunch money. And she asked me if I would help her. I agreed to help her. Now, the average Vietnamese adult male is about 5'6", 5'7", maybe weigh 125, 130 pounds. Myself, barefoot, 6 feet tall, combat boots, 6'1", steel helmet, about 6'2", 6'3", M14, 45 on my hip, and an attitude. So I escorted her to her bus stop 3 mornings in a row. It was a little bit out of my way to be up and ready maybe an hour earlier than I would normally, but it was worth it. Her and her mom, and we were friends, and I wanted to help protect this girl. Her father was off fighting for his country. So I escorted her to her bus stop 3 mornings in a row, and the cowboys got the message, and they never bothered her again. They took one look at me, and they thought, no, I don't think so. I don't want to mess with that tall American with an M14, 45, and an attitude. And as a thank you, her and her mother invited me over for dinner to their home, a simple Vietnamese traditional home built of bamboo and banana leaves, and it was clean, it was neat, and I had a good meal, and I enjoyed their company for the evening. My first bodyguard, well, not really my first bodyguard assignment. My first bodyguard assignment was for my parents when the neighborhood we lived in changed dramatically after Brown versus Board of Education back in the mid-1950s. Went from a very nice middle-class neighborhood to basically the ghetto in a period of about 2 to 3 years. And my first bodyguard assignment was to protect my kid brother on the schoolyard because he was getting threats and getting beat up on the schoolyard. So every recess we would link up, and I would protect him until the recess was over. And that went on for I guess about 3 or 4 months until my parents sold their home and moved to the suburbs of St. Louis. But even earlier than that, I took it upon myself to save my little brother. The summer I turned 5 years old, the same summer he turned 3, I saved him from being attacked by a dog. Here's our break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here, the 7th of March. My website is thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. Here's something that will help you and help me and my wife, Dr. Moore. If you've been thinking about pondering getting yourself an energy cleaner and a mattress pad, it will help you to do so, and it'll help me tremendously. I'm being hit in the face here with the cost of the alternative cancer treatments. My lovely wife, Dr. Moore, has stage 4 breast cancer, and what she wants to do is not covered by any insurance. IV vitamin C, IV B17, the coffee enemas, and so forth are not covered by any insurance. So it'll help you if you buy an energy cleaner and a mattress pad to go with it, and it'll help me because I need funding to pay for these alternative modalities that aren't covered by any insurance in any way, shape, or form. So if you've been procrastinating, thinking about helping yourself to get relief from your joint pain, arthritis pain, back pain, if you really want to get a good night's sleep, you've been thinking about it, pondering it, I'm encouraging you to move forward and make that decision. Go ahead and get yourself an energy cleaner, along with a mattress pad to go with it. Everything's right there at my website at thelibertyman.com, the energy cleaner, the mattress pads. Yes, I take PayPal. PayPal is the most secure way to make any payment online. MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Diners Club, everything's right there. You can call my toll-free order line to place your order, or you can mail in a check or money order. My address is right there at my website. My toll-free order line, keep in mind, I have a 90-day money-back guarantee. The toll-free order line is 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Taking your questions, calls, and comments here, Republic Broadcasting at 800-313-9443. As I sometimes say, I went to Vietnam a boy, and I came back a man. When I say boy, I was only, when my feet touched the tarmac in Vietnam, I've been out of high school 15 months. Seriously. When I went into basic training, I'd just been in a state high school track meet 6 months before that. Yeah, I was still a boy in most ways. I had the physique of a man, a very athletic, tough young man, but I had the mindset and the attitude of a boy, the immaturity of a boy. When you're in combat, you grow up fast. You grow up very fast. You see things, hear things, do things that no man should ever have to do. That's just the nature of combat. Any war, anytime. All wars are horrendous. Anybody who tells you different is living in a dream. All wars are horrific. And it seems like with each successive war, we have to learn all over again about the effects of combat on the persona of men and women who go through combat. And I think in World War I they called it shell shock, or in World War II they called it combat fatigue. Probably the same thing for Korea. Now they're calling it post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD. But that's happened in all wars going back for time immemorial. The Native Americans have their own protocols for reintegrating their combat veterans back into their society. We here in the U.S., what we've been doing doesn't work. What we've been doing is a combination of counseling and psychotropic drugs. I firmly believe that the psychotropic drugs are mostly responsible for the unprecedented number of suicides that we're having among these veterans. That's completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. But getting back to situational awareness, there's ways you can improve your situational awareness, things you can do to make sure you're safe. Let's say you're a woman and you have a business meeting to go to. You'll be thinking to yourself, where is this business meeting? What part of the city is it in, if it's in a city? Let's see, if you haven't been there before, you might be some questions in your mind about parking, what time of day it is. Typically it's going to be during the daytime, but it could be early evening. It could be before breakfast, as far as that goes, or a breakfast meeting. So you'll have questions about the location of the meeting, whether it's a office or a restaurant, the location of that meeting, the parking facilities that there is, the neighborhood that it's located in, all these things. Now, most women I know, most business women involved in going to various business functions, the last thing they want to do is to communicate their fear for personal safety and to separate them from the men who would not give it a second thought. For most men, most of the time, the women want to have the same status every which way that the men do, and they typically don't want to point themselves out as being fearful for their personal security because of the time, the location of a business meeting, appointment, whatever it might be. So typically what they do is they go ahead and attend the meeting anyway, while at the same time being fearful for personal safety and personal security. I've heard it said, and there's some truth to it, that women's liberation ends at the beginning of a dark parking lot. Now that's kind of a flippant statement on one hand, but there's some truth to it. Of course there's some truth to it. Typically, parking garages are very solitary places with few, if any, people around. Lots of hiding places behind out vehicles and those huge concrete pillars that support the structure. May or may not be good lighting. May be limited access. But it can be a scary place. It really can. Now, there's ways to deal with this. Now, some upscale businesses, I should say office buildings, may have valet parking. That's pretty safe. It's going to cost you some money. Most men and almost all women don't want to pay the extra money to pay for valet parking, but that's very secure to make use of valet parking. Young woman in my family, she was attending an event over the weekend, a play down in the city, and her plan, she was meeting a friend, was to have one of them park their vehicle at a free parking lot a mile or two from the venue, and then ride the other vehicle back to where there would be a monitored or a manned parking lot near the venue where they were going. I remember my kid brother going to the same venue a few years ago, and I was asking where he's parking. He said he's going to park at a meter on the street. And I said, don't do that. You want to go to an attended parking lot. Now granted, the minimum wage attendant at the parking lot is not going to risk their life to stop a thief from harming your car on one hand. On the other, they're a witness, and criminals don't want witnesses. So an attended parking lot is typically, they're pretty well lighted. obviously there's a person there who would have a telephone, and the odds of your motor vehicle being tampered with are dramatically reduced when you use an attended parking lot as opposed to parking on a street at a meter or parking at an unattended parking lot. Far, far reduced. And these motor vehicles are very tempting targets. I've watched criminals walk down the street, stopping momentarily or slowing down momentarily at each vehicle, peering inside to see what there might be worth stealing. And these snatch and grab thefts happen in seconds. The side glass of motor vehicles turns to cubes when you smack it really hard. The front and back windows don't, but the side windows do. They turn to cubes. And the criminals know this. They smack it. They reach inside. They grab the laptop, the tablet, the leather jacket, whatever it might be that they can see, and they're on their way, literally in 8 or 10 seconds. Literally in 8 to 10 seconds with your property and leaving behind the damage to your motor vehicle. I recall my wife and I were leaving a venue. It was a play or a concert, I don't recall which. It was nighttime when we left the venue, walking to the attended parking lot. And there were 3 or 4 males on the corner, apparently not doing anything except standing there talking. One of them approached me and asked me if I had change for a $5 bill, whatever it was. And without slowing down, my wife and I kept walking. I had my wife in my left arm. My right hand was in my trousers pocket with holding onto my .38 snub-nose Smith & Wesson. Without slowing down, I said in a strong voice, "No, I don't," and "Have a good evening," and kept walking. The criminal has to get you stopped first before they can commit their crime. They have to get you stopped first. Don't stop. It may sound pretty simplistic, but don't stop. One of the attorneys I worked with, World War II combat veteran, he was leaving a venue down in the city when he was approached by a man with a weapon. I forget if it was a knife or a gun, probably a knife, and stated his intent to rob my friend, the attorney. My friend, the attorney, had his small revolver in his hand. It was so small, one of these little North American revolvers, that when it was poor light. He pulled it, pointed at the young man, and the young man wasn't sure what he was holding until my friend cocked the hammer. Then he understood he had a pistol just a couple of feet from his face, and he declined to proceed with the robbery and escaped, and no harm was done. You have to be ready. You have to have situational awareness. Quite frankly, you need to be armed. That's imperative, in my opinion. There's a old saying that God created man and Colonel Colt made them equal. That goes back more than a century. God created man and Colonel Colt made them equal. The average adult female in this country is about the size of a 12-year-old boy, about 5'2", maybe 120, 125 pounds, about the size of a healthy 12-year-old. A person of that stature is not going to go toe-to-toe in unarmed combat with a healthy adult male. That's simply not going to happen. The only place that happens with success for the woman is in the movies. I encourage all women all the time to get a good basic course in unarmed combat at a martial arts studio. You don't need to learn to speak Korean or dress up like a Korean rice farmer from 2 centuries ago. You do need to learn the basics, similar to what a cadet learns in police academy. Typical police academy spends 18 to 20 hours on unarmed combat. That's about what they spend. That's all you need also. You don't need to be in there for, years, unless it becomes a hobby, of course. A good instructor will teach women how to break holds and escape. They will not Obviously, if you want them to, they will teach you how to fight. But you're not going to. Women can't hit hard enough. I don't care how well trained they are to engage in a fight with a healthy adult male. They simply don't have the power behind a punch or a kick to do much harm to a man most of the time. They need to learn how to break holds and escape. And a good martial arts instructor knows this, and that's what they will teach. Now, I don't object and have no problems with a woman who wants to learn how to fight a man, but I think it's a waste of money and time, and it will not work for most women most of the time. There could be exceptions. There could be. And this goes to the many things that people believe are skewed and influenced by TVs and movies, where we see a woman who becomes a Navy SEAL, for example, in a film, Demi Moore. That's a fantasy. That's an absolute fantasy. You might as well be watching a cartoon. We have a caller on hold here. We got Diane in Arizona. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, John. Many years ago, I had a black belt in Japanese Kenpo, did a lot of Aikido and a lot of Judo. And what I could tell other women, which I couldn't understand until I experienced it more myself, is that you cannot understand how much stronger guys are than you are, for the most part, unless, of course, you're a muscle weightlifter and do a lot of martial arts. And you're against an IT type person, that the males are much stronger and their bone structure is a lot heavier. Their head cranium is a lot heavier, and that there's just, like I would tell my female students, that you cannot afford to get hit. You cannot afford to get hit. So learn to block really good.
Right.
But,
right.
So I definitely support that attitude. Knowledge is a wonderful thing.
All right. Well, thank you, Diane. We appreciate the call. Anything else?
Not today. I had something for Professor McCanney, but obviously he's not on today.
Well, yeah, he's unavailable today. He sent me a note. He should be available next week, and you can talk to him next week.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. We appreciate the call. Call number is 800-313-9443. The power and influence of TV and movies is phenomenal. The switchover from revolvers for police use to semi-automatics pistols is largely based on the fantasy developed by movies and TVs as opposed to the reality of what's involved in police work most of the time. Police officers used revolvers successfully for basically a century. Quite well. No problems whatsoever. Revolvers are safer than semi-automatic because they're far less complex. Training time required is less, and so forth. And for police work, I think they're excellent. Here's our last break this hour. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 7th of March. Well, I believe all men, especially men who have not been involved in violent contact sports, get it out, John, should also take a basic course in martial arts. It wouldn't hurt for all men to take the basic course, but men who've been involved in violent contact sports such as football and wrestling, they know what it feels like to get hit and get hard and recover properly, how to fall properly without getting injured. how to instantly get back up on their feet and get back in the fight. In American culture, girls typically cease roughhouse playing around the beginning of puberty, around 12 years old or so, is when most American girls discontinue that roughhouse playing that they might engage in when they're younger. Point being, most American women, most of the time, it's been a long time since they were hit hard enough to get knocked down. It's a completely alien experience to them. It's something that will instantly put them in fear and cause them to curl up in a ball possibly and cry and not respond properly. Criminals know this, by the way. When they're in jail, they practice how to engage a woman, attack her, and rape her. And they exchange ideas, and they even practice how to do these maneuvers. You don't think so, you're living in a dreamland. A woman who's been in a martial arts class, they will know what it will be in a safe environment where they'll get hit hard enough to get knocked down, but it'll be a padded floor. And they'll get that experience. They'll know what it feels like, and it won't cause them to be paralyzed with fear, which, if they haven't had that training, is much more likely to happen. So, ladies, do yourselves a favor. You may even take a girlfriend or two with you. It'd be more fun if you got a couple of women you know. Find your local martial arts studio. Talk to the proprietor. Let them know you want to get some training for street safety training similar to what a police cadet gets, that kind of training. You don't want to become a martial arts expert. That takes years. If you want to pursue that, that's fine. But you need a good, I'd say 18 hours of training or so to get that basic knowledge and experience so that if you do have that kind of confrontation, you have a better chance of coming out of it on the other side with no harm to yourself. I strongly urge you to do that. Gentlemen, if you've never been involved in violent contact sports such as football or wrestling, you definitely need that training. And all men could stand it as far as that goes. There's benefits to all people all the time getting this training. But the ones I've emphasized are the ones that need it the most. All women all the time and all men who've never been involved in violent contact sports. They're the ones who need it the most. It wouldn't hurt to have youngsters involved. It's a good form of discipline and training for them as well. Here's our top of the hour break. We hope to be back with Jeff Nyquist. Stay tuned. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 7th of March. Prep tip of the day. I want to encourage all of you to maintain your situational awareness, work on it, improve on it, and your situational awareness. It will be a good thing that will help you and help everybody that you know and love. Okay, this has become our regular feature, the second hour on Wednesdays, this regular feature being my friend Jeff Nyquist. And we talk about geopolitical matters. We talk about the international communist conspiracy, which has been around since before 1917, but 1917 is when it really took off with the takeover of Russia by the international communist conspiracy. We have these conversations with my friend Jeff Nyquist, and we're ready to go here. The call number, if you've got a question for Jeff, is 800-313-9443. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, John.
Well, sir, the international scene continues to move forward with all the nuances that are contrived to make things appear something they're not, aren't they?
Yes, that's true. It's very interesting to see how this Russia-Trump thing advances, and it's also very interesting to see how the media gets it wrong again and again. And the American people, I was working on a paper with a Romanian researcher for a group in Europe, and we got a Romanian minister to give us his opinion about things. And he, in fact, said something similar to what I said. He said people in the West don't understand how the Russians work. And this goes back in Russian history a long time, where they play both sides. We in the West, we think there's only two sides. But the Russians think they can win by playing both sides. And it's very hard for us to understand this game. And of course, this is where you get Russian agents pretending to be anti-Russian. This is where you have Putin at the same time pretends to be pro-Muslim, okay, and you can find those pronouncements, go on the Internet, and then he pretends to be a defender of the West against Islam. And you say, well, how can you get away with it? It's because, well, we don't pay attention that closely to everything they say. We kind of hear what we want to hear, and a lot of the strategy that the Russians use depend on that, on human nature, on our desire to hear what we want to hear. And it's true in America. They've also conditioned us through our media. The number of communist and Russian agents, the Russians use the communists, the Russians try to use the right, the Russians use Islam, the Russians have infiltrated the churches. You see how they pop up everywhere. And it's something we don't understand, that and your thinking can be manipulated, and manipulating conservative thinking is very important for the Russians. It always has been.
So, and they have their own style of manipulation. I agree. Now, my understanding, Jeff, and you may have some follow-up on this, is that the Russian intelligence services infiltrated by use of money, primarily, the Muslim masadras, I think they call them, the schools that teach young men to become imams. They infiltrated them in the late 60s, early 70s to institute a program of hatred of the West. All right, do you have any knowledge or follow-up on that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been working on that, actually, in the last few weeks. It's very true. This goes way back to the Russian Civil War. You know, Lenin's second pronouncement after taking power was addressed to the Muslim toilers. And he basically said, and this was the belief at the time, that Muslims made up a very important subgroup, fighting against imperialism. And they believed that Muslims, because they lived in the world that the British and the French dominated colonially, that they were going to mobilize the Muslims as allies, and they were going to infiltrate them and make friends with them. The Muslims in Central Asia who opposed the Tsar, very quickly, most of them joined the Reds. They joined the communists. And they attacked the bourgeois Muslims. You know, Muslim countries are very poor, so they're ready for communism. They're ready for a doctrine which practices supposedly what the Quran preaches, which is equality. So Islam has been an area where the Russians could move faster, where a liberation form of theology could operate. And also, with the rampant homosexuality in some of the Muslim countries, the opportunities for blackmail and pedophilia and the use of these techniques to further the cause, so to speak, among Muslims was also used. So, the infiltration of Pakistan, Afghanistan, all these countries really was very advanced long before even recent years.
Well, that's some good follow-up there, Jeff. I wasn't aware of that history going back another half century before my awareness of around 1969, 1970. And that certainly adds fuel to the fire to show how deep and how far back this goes, doesn't it?
Yeah, and of course, international
Jeff,
terrorism.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
International terrorism as a phenomenon, as a global phenomenon, airline hijacking and bombings and things like this. This popped up in the 1960s, and you will notice that communists like the Cubans And communist trained Arabs who aren't really Islamists, like the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, who were trained in Russia, were trained by the Russians. They were like the people who spearheaded the terrorism. And the Russians really were the organizers of global terrorism. And it was part of Russia's strategy to create terrorism. Airline hijacking as a terrorist method was invented by a KGB general in Moscow in 1960. But, of course, it was implemented later in the 1960s. And, of course, use of organized crime and opium trafficking, which is really an important component of the Afghan, thing. Afghanistan isn't important because it has oil, which it really doesn't have. It's important because it has opium. And the trade in opium was very important to the Russians going back to 1960. And of course, the Muslim world, of course, is important in general because of the large numbers of people and the large numbers of countries that are Muslim.
Right. Well, Jeff, when I was a young man, young adult, 18 years old, if I wanted to board an airplane with a firearm, I would simply carry the firearm onto the plane in a pistol case or a rifle or shotgun case, hand it to the stewardess. We didn't have any homosexual flight attendants at the time, men, and then the stewardess would take it, put it in the cockpit for the duration of flight, and when the flight was over, I would have the stewardess recover my firearm from the cockpit, and I would deplane. You tell this to a youngster now, they look at you like you got two heads, but that's the way it was, wasn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have changed, and you make a good point, because a terrorist attack can achieve many things. It can divide a society, and it can also cause the society to change its laws. It can change its national habits and even its way of thinking. So, and that can help shape them in a way that is helpful to the communists.
Well, destroying culture and destroying beliefs. My understanding, Jeff, when Mao Zedong took over China, he spent the first several years not attempting to teach anything about Marxism or communism, but the first 4 or 5 years focusing on Darwinian evolutionary theory to break the traditional Chinese beliefs and religious practices, didn't he?
Yes, in fact, he was so much opposed to traditional Chinese teachings that he boasted at one point that the first Chinese emperor, the first Qin emperor, killed 10,000 Confucian scholars, and we've killed 100,000. So he's nothing compared to us. So it was, yes, indeed, to destroy Chinese tradition, which is Chinese tradition is mystical. They refer to God, so to speak, in their various traditions. The mandate of heaven is sort of like the will of God.
Right.
And so they have their own idea of the divine in China, and destroying that was part of Mao's game. Of course, the communists are destroyers. They, what is more valuable that humans have than their heritage, than their religious understandings and their relationship with God? And then to destroy that is that they go after that first in every subtle way they can, is very interesting.
Well, it is, and that's exactly how they operate. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a question or comment for Jeff Nyquist, give us a call at 800-313-9443. We've talked previously, Jeff, about how the communists infiltrated and took over the schools that teach the teachers, but they also took over the schools that teach the artists. And since World War II, we've seen art become basically nonsensical globs of paint and sculptures that make no sense. Here in St. Louis, my hometown, there's a sculpture park that if there is a construction project taking place in the park, you might be walking through and can't tell the difference between construction debris and what's supposed to be a work of art, Jeff.
Yeah, well, that goes to the kind of nihilism that communism produces. The technical name for communism is called dialectical materialism. It's also called scientific socialism, and it's atheistic. It's very atheistic, and of course, if there is no spiritual truth, if there's only matter, materialism, and spirit doesn't exist, that's a pretty bleak view, because you're basically saying that human consciousness is not really real. But the only thing that's real is, like the floor and the ceiling and the four walls and any objects that might be in the room. That is very nihilistic, because it's really quite the opposite. What's important is consciousness, human consciousness. It's the center of the focus of existence, is consciousness itself. And to negate that, to claim that objects are important, that things are more important than people, or that spirit is you could almost not think of something more destructive to human self-worth and to culture and to the idea of meaning. I saw Jordan Peterson very cleverly. He said, I'm no longer a materialist. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, and he said, because matter doesn't matter, meaning matters. He said, and he said it's the pattern in matter, it's the intelligence in matter. That's where meaning comes from, and that is the evidence of the spiritual. That's the evidence of mind, of the existence of the psyche, of the So this is what communism negates. It negates the individual human being. It negates spiritual experience. It negates that we aren't material beings. We are spiritual material beings.
Right. Well, the philosophy that's been in place in Russia for a century now, would that philosophy be largely responsible for most of the adult males in that country being alcoholics who don't get married, don't make babies, and have very little zest for life in the normal sense of the word in the West?
Yes, absolutely right. That's a very good point. And of course, this is going to happen to us. It's already begun to happen to us with the atheistic education. Women and men are being demoralized. Society's being demoralized. Think about that word, demoralized. And of course, what you're describing with all those alcoholic men in Russia is men who are demoralized. And just look at the United States. What is feminism, radical feminism, calculated to do? It's calculated to demoralize. What is homosexual marriage calculated to do? It's calculated to demoralize normal marriage, to change the meaning of words in sinister ways, like the word marriage, which in my grandfather's dictionary meant the union of male and female. To change that to the union of what and what, it's demoralization. This is nihilism. It's not, anti-homosexual to say this. It's merely acknowledging the truth of language and meaning. A homosexual couple can't have children. They cannot create new life. And that's got to be very, very important fact. In fact,
it's got to be.
It's got to be. The fact that we have to recreate ourselves every generation, or there's no humans left on Earth, has got to be one of the most important things that the facts that we need to acknowledge. And we have a whole society that acts like, well, that doesn't matter, when it was one of the most important things. Yeah.
I got a homework assignment for you, if you haven't done this already. There's a motion picture, a Hollywood motion picture. Your homework assignment is to watch this film. The title is one word, Idiocracy.
Oh.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I have seen. I've seen that one. Yes.
Well, then you don't need to watch it. You've already seen it. But the consequences of providing financial incentives for the less intelligent, non-productive people to have lots of babies, while providing disincentives for the intelligent, productive people to not have babies. Did I get this right? Yeah, I think I did. The consequences of that over several generations are absolutely disastrous to any society, aren't they?
Yeah, well, anybody who's smart now knows that, you know, if you're a guy, getting married is really dangerous, because with no-fault divorce, you can end up, I mean, according to the Constitution, you can't be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. But the family courts do that every day.
They do.
Fathers and
I was
mothers
part
who,
of this. I was in the legal system when that all began back in 1972, 73. It dramatically changed our entire culture overnight. Here's our break. Stay tuned. Back.
Are you spiritually and mentally armed and ready for the battle ahead? Don't miss Hear the Watchman Dallas 2018, March 23rd through the 25th at the Hilton Dallas Fort Worth Lakes Executive Conference Center. Join the remnant body of Christ at this powerful, life-changing event. Activate your faith and join 18 prophetic teachers of truth, including L.A. Marzulli, Pastor Paul Begley, Dr. Donna Mary Colbert, along with this year's special guest, prophetic prayer walker Henry Groover. The time is now to gain ground and make history as we approach turbulent times. Get baptized, get trained, be freed of strongholds that bind you. You will be empowered, you will be blessed. This could be the most important weekend of your life. Join God's Army in 2018. Visit hearthewatchman.com to reserve your seat today. This event will sell out. Go to hearthewatchman.com and make your reservation. And in the end, Jesus wins.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 7th of March. My website is thelibertyman.com. If you plan on attending the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas, you want a discount on the tickets, go to my website, thelibertyman.com. Scroll down to the Hear the Watchman banner to get your promotion code for the discount to attend the conference. I look forward to seeing a lot of you there. Visiting with Jeff Nyquist. His website is jrnyquist.com. There's a link on my links page at thelibertyman.com. Jeff, I want to do a segue here. It's been about almost 2 years ago when all this controversy about Civil War battle monuments came up. I started looking and doing a little research into the Civil War, which wasn't a Civil War, of course. But my understanding is that there were several high-level appointees in the Lincoln administration who had been part of the communist coup attempt in Germany in the 1840s. What's your knowledge of this, if anything, sir?
Well, yeah, the 1848 revolution was one in which Karl Marx had dreamed of taking over Germany and becoming dictator of Germany. And, of course, there were a lot of people who organized for that. And, of course, a lot of them had to leave like Karl Marx did. Karl Marx ended up living in London, England. But a lot of them left to come to America. and some of them even became Civil War generals and entered politics. And so there was an influx from Germany and of communists at that time, and that's kind of where we got our first wave of indigenous communist immigrants. It's true. And of course, they saw abolitionism and the Civil War as a kind of a gateway for introducing more radical ideas at the time.
Jeff, would it be a fair statement to say that almost no American adults have knowledge of what you and I are talking about right now?
Well, it's just they don't know the history of communism, so they don't know. But, I mean, as far as the Civil War, it doesn't mean that, slavery was right or anything like that. To say that the fact that communists, communists got involved in the civil rights movement, and they're very influential in the black community. Part of the demagogy of communism is that it appeals to people who have been oppressed or wronged in the past, and it tries to win them over to a cause that's more wrong and more oppressive. Where society has, been evolving, at least American society has been evolving to righting wrongs and making, following those principles of the founders. The founders of the country, they were committed to eventually repealing slavery. And this was George Washington freed his slaves. A lot of people don't know that. And there was a core group in the South that wanted to build an ideology around slavery and build an empire around slavery. And this caused conflict. And, of course, the communists always appear wherever there is conflict and try to take advantage, try to insert themselves and take advantage of that conflict.
Exactly. We got a caller on hold here, Jeff. We got Linda in Ohio. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning. I have a question that's sort of off topic, but my friend and I got into a discussion, friendly, about Edward Snowden, and quite frankly, she saw the movie, and I didn't, but I don't recall whether he was regarded as a hero or a traitor, or in between. Could you respond to that, and I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
Whether you mean Oliver Stone's movie about Snowden?
We assume so. She's already hung up. Right.
Yeah, I assume so. I haven't seen the movie. I saw Oliver Stone interviewed on Russian television by Vladimir Posner, of all people, about it. I have seen Snowden interviewed. It's hard to evaluate Snowden. He went to Russia. First, he met with the Chinese and the Russians. Then I believe he met with them in Hong Kong. Am I remembering that right, John?
I believe so.
And then he fled to Russia, where he now lives in Russia. Now, that as a sworn, someone who takes an oath of allegiance to the United States and its Constitution, and who is a holder of secrets, to go to our enemies. People could say, "Oh, he's a hero. He wanted to, talk about the government doing bad things." Well, yeah, then he should have gone to the American people. He should have gone to the press, not to the enemies of the American people. And this is what makes many of us regard him as a traitor. A person who holds secrets, who works at the National Security Agency as a contractor, should not be going to China, should not be going to Russia, should not be, what is he going there for if he's not revealing secrets? What is that? What is the meaning of that if he's not revealing secrets? So that's not right. And it is treason, what he did.
Jeff, hold that thought. Jeff, hold that thought. We got about an hour break. Call number is 800-313-9443. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our Energy Cleaner promotion, which began August of 2000, 16. In this promotion, you get to buy an energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the energy cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with. And, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you. We are back with John back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 7th of March. My website is thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. Our list of movies and TV shows with images of continents with coastlines, new coastlines, continues to grow. We have our first image of 2018 posted already. If you find one yourself, get that screen capture to me. You get your choice of any of my 5 DVDs as a thank you. Also, of course, is my home business, Energy Cleaners. Now that we're dealing with the stage 4 breast cancer with my wife, we have unexpected expenses. So it's more important than ever that I sell Energy Cleaners. It's more important than ever that you get one for yourself. It's a win-win situation. You get your life back, and I help out with the family finances here to get the things that we need to get done here for my wife. The energy cleaner is listed for sale at my website. If you got arthritis pain, joint pain, back pain, it will probably help. Not sleeping well, that's when you heal. You need to sleep well. It will help with that also. Only $285 shipping included to American zip codes. I do take PayPal, MasterCard, Visa. You can send me a check if you need to. My address is at my website at thelibertyman.com. My toll-free order line, here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Visiting with Jeff Nyquist. His website's linked on my links page at thelibertyman.com. We are taking your questions, calls, and comments at 800-313-9443. Jeff, we got a couple of calls on hold here. First, we have John in Texas. Good morning, John.
Hello, Mr. Nyquist. I understand that Marxist philosophy derives much of its basis from Hegel and his dialectical philosophy. What do you know about Hegel? What was his background, and how does he figure into the history of Marxism?
Well, Hegel was not a materialist. Yeah, Hegel was not a materialist like Marx. So Marx claimed that he had turned Hegel right side up by making Hegel's dialectic about materialism. But Hegel's philosophy is quite hard to understand, and Hegel believes that history is the dialectical movement of spirit through history. And of course, this involves very old concepts going back to Heraclitus, who Karl Marx wrote, I believe, his doctoral thesis on. Heraclitus was the Greek philosopher who said that the one constant in the universe is change, and he had a theory about what is called enantiodroma, or what we would call enantiodromia, which is that things become their opposites. They change into their opposites. And Marx I would say originally Hegel took that idea and noticed in history there was a dialectical movement of spirit in history where you had an idea, then something against that idea, and then you had something new coming from the conflict of those ideas. That's basically Hegel's idea, and Hegel's notion was that freedom, the desire for freedom or a more perfect society, would get you there. And of course, Hegel's end society is that the perfect form of society was, of course, the Prussian monarchy of the 19th century was the perfect form. to which history had always been moving. So this is kind of different from Marx in that Marx wanted to overthrow capitalism and all monarchies. So,
and I understand that Hegel was deeply involved with mesmerism and all kinds of mysticism. I think wasn't he a Freemason?
I don't know whether he was a Freemason, but it wouldn't have been uncommon in those days for someone who was an intellectual like that to deal with those things. So, yeah, I don't really know the answer to that question.
Anything else, John? We need to move on here soon. Go ahead.
Well, see, how is Germany about Germany? It's always been central to the communist plan to dominate Europe since the Bolshevik Revolution. Correct?
Yes, that's true. Well, it was because Germany is the largest in terms of Central and Western Europe. It's the largest country in terms of population, and it had industrialized. It was the most industrialized country in Europe. So it was the most advanced, you could say, country in Europe, on the continent of Europe. Britain, of course, was very heavily industrialized first, but that's why Germany was very important to the communists.
But Lenin, after he took over, he took over Russia with the help of Erich Ludendorff, the chief.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's right. The Germans supported the revolution in Russia because they wanted Russia out of World War I. Germany was stuck in World War I in a two-fronted war, so having a revolution in Russia would get Germany out of the trouble of a two-fronted war, because they made a deal with the revolutionaries that if they supported them, they would make a peace treaty with Germany that would be to Germany's advantage. And that's what Lenin did. It was called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. And that was the treaty in which Lenin gave up a lot of Russian territory to Germany and allowed, for the first time, an independent Ukraine to be formed.
But his instructions were that they just sign anything. He said the coming revolution in Germany will invalidate any treaty. So what he understood.
Yeah, Lenin. Lenin correctly predicted that the Kaiser would be overthrown. Yes.
So he thought that it was just a temporary sort of truce until he could get support from the Germans to overthrow the white, to doing his white opposition, and even was allowed to conscript German and Austrian prisoners of war into the Red Army, wasn't he, to fight against the whites?
Well, there were Austrian and German prisoners who fought for the whites. So, like the Czech Legion joined the whites. There were a legion of Czech prisoners who had fought for the Austrians, who ended up fighting for the whites. Yeah, now you're getting into the Russian Civil War, which is a very complicated piece of history. But yes, the Kaiser thought that Lenin was his puppet, because all he had to do was expose that Lenin had been supported by him, and Lenin thought the Kaiser was dead because the Kaiser was going to be overthrown. And it turned out of the two, the Kaiser was wrong and Lenin was right. The Kaiser was never able to play his game against Lenin eventually.
Mm-hmm. But
yeah.
Essentially, here's what I really want to ask. What is but they helped. I understand that the Bolsheviks actually helped rearm the Germans in a subversive maneuver against the Treaty of Versailles. They allowed them to train pilots on Soviet territory, and they allowed them to train officers in modern warfare in exchange for economic aid. They supplied. They allowed the Reichswehr to rebuild, to circumvent the Treaty of Versailles by training on Russian soil pilots, and eventually what it was that Lenin was going to eventually use Germany to start a second imperialist war that would, that would allow, use Germany as an icebreaker to break open the Bolshevik Revolution and eventually take over Europe. And that was the real impetus of the second.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Lenin talked about, they called the First World War the First Imperialist War, and then they foresaw that another war would happen, and Germany could be the instigator of it. And yes, that's correct. Stalin referred to Hitler as the icebreaker of the revolution, that they were going to use Hitler. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, John, we've covered your questions, I think, enough for this week, and why don't you call back next week with some more? Okay?
All right,
we need to move on.
Okay.
We need to move on. Thank you, John. We appreciate it. Next we go to Mike in Idaho. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, John. Jeff, how are you guys doing?
Good. What's in your mind, sir?
Okay.
Let's get back to our government. When you were talking about the PLO being trained by Russia, it brings back the old statement. I can't remember who made it. John, you might, that they would take over our country without ever firing a shot from within. Well, when Obama took over the presidency, and I read the report, but I didn't dig into the transcripts to make sure. Before, you couldn't get Obama's college transcripts. I got Michelle Obama's, but I didn't get his. But they said that his time in Berkeley was paid for by the PLO. Now, that seemed like that might be mingling within our government right there, wouldn't you think?
If that's true, that would be extremely important information. Jeff, you got any knowledge of this?
Well, Obama didn't go to Berkeley. He went to Occidental, and then he went to Columbia. And then, of course, he had...
it was one of them. I thought it was Berkeley, but it might have been Occidental. But the report, I didn't verify it, so I'm just saying I've read it.
Right.
What I got, and it had said that they had discovered that it was funded by the PLO at that point.
It
and
wasn't
that
the PLO.
You mentioned
there was somebody who now I'm not remembering his name. He was a Saudi, a rich Saudi individual who is some have nicknamed him the Red Sheikh, who paid for Obama's education. He's one of those people who's been arrested in Saudi Arabia and has had his wealth taken away in the recent reorganization of Saudi Arabia. They've been going after these red sheikhs in Saudi Arabia. A lot of people don't know, but the Russians recognized a long time ago that they had friends in the Muslim world and that they were going to make friends in Saudi Arabia, in all the different Arab countries. And a number of these figures, a number of figures in that country developed relationships with Russia. And in fact, at the Katahan Institute, which is a Russian think tank in Russia, run by Duginites, people who are followers of Alexander Dugin, they wrote a piece about this. If you go to the website of the Katahan Institute, you'll find it. The article is called Red Pashas. And I would recommend everybody to read it. Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it was a communist Islamist that was helping Obama in his education.
Okay, so the fact that the PLO was trained in Russia, it could be, but with all the things that are going on with Russia now towards trying to influence our elections and things, it seems like they've been trying to mingle with it, and that statement of taking over our country without ever firing a shot is kind of coming true at this point from internally.
Well, when Obama
if we prove
elected,
that they actually have been messing with our elections.
Okay. Yeah, they mess with us in all kinds of ways. More importantly, they mess with our thinking, so that you have, the left and the right both think about this problem in the wrong way, and that helps them. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you can sway somebody's way of thinking, or just put a question in their mind, then they're not sure about themselves anymore. Sure. I appreciate that answer because I was always curious about if the PLO actually had some involvement in there.
It was a red sheikh from Saudi Arabia that financed Obama's education.
Okay, well that's still not good.
Obviously.
All right, well I appreciate it, John, Jeff. I appreciate all the information you guys are providing, and people need to hear it.
Appreciate the call, Mike. Thank you. The call number is
God
800.
Bless.
Thank you, sir. Call number is 800-313-9443. The communists are insidious at multiple levels in education, labor unions, politics, finance, military. Jeff, I don't know if I ever mentioned to you, but a gentleman I know was in charge of security for the B-1 bomber program with Rockwell International, and he was told that there would be a delegation of Chinese military people visiting the plant on a weekend, and he was to extend every courtesy to these men, allow them full access to everything, including taking photographs and video. And his response was, why am I here? Why do you even employ me? To keep homeless people out? Why do I even have this job? And he resigned shortly after that, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would have been under the Reagan administration, huh? Or was it under yes, Reagan? I would have guessed.
Yeah, it would have been the late 1980s, early 1990s, along in there. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's the problem is we regarded China as an ally, and this, again, was one of the double games that the Chinese like to play with us, and the Russians play. They pretended to be enemies, and they exaggerated the differences between the Soviet Union and Communist China in order to get us to come in and industrialize China. We are responsible for making China into a superpower, and we would have never done it if we thought that they were aligned with Russia. But now we find that the Russians and Chinese are firmly behind North Korea, and both are saying they will go to war with us as allies if we try to stop North Korea from developing weapons that can destroy American cities.
Yes. Well, the growth of China has been phenomenal. I've told this story a number of times. I remember reading in the Wall Street Journal, it may have been the New York Times, but I believe the Wall Street Journal would have been about 1972, a story about the first privately owned motor vehicle in the entire country of China. That's what the article was about. Now, that's only, 46 years ago that the first person purchased the first privately owned vehicle. It was a 2-ton flatbed truck, by the way. And he had to get permission from the local communist control group and agree to transport his neighbors if they needed transportation before he could make that purchase. That's only 46 years ago. Look how far they've come in these 46 years.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It is because a lot of people don't understand that according to communist theory, it is perfectly okay to adopt state capitalism if you are moving from the state of feudalism and, if you need to pass through the capitalist stage to reach communism. And this is what both the Soviet Union and China have done. And so they justify the capitalism in the country as part of their communist program.
Amazing. We have a couple of callers on hold. We're quickly running out of time, so we need to get to these callers. After the break, we've got 2 callers and just about 3 minutes. It's going to be interesting. Stay tuned. All right, we are back with our final segment here with Jeff Nyquist on Wednesday, the 7th of March. Our next caller is Glenn in Philadelphia. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Jeff. Real quickly, I know you're short on time, so I'll be quick. When I think of Russia, Germany, and America in the 20th century, what I see is 3 entities clinging to vestiges of Roman imperialism and some of the philosophy like that. if you look at the Russian term czar is even spelled C-Z-A-R, Caesar, so Caesar, and as in Roman Caesar. And in Germany, the word Kaiser is Caesar. In America, we don't have any other word that pertains to that, but the Roman Senate on Capitoline Hill, the American Senate meets on Capitol Hill, and there are two Roman fasces on either side of the podium in the House of Representatives. So each of these nations, I would suggest partially, aspire to or clinging to vestiges of Roman imperialism. When you bring the Bolshevism in, you've got a whole nother insidious, form of power seeking with Zionism behind it. And then that's another ball of wax. All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the call. Any follow-up there, Jeff, before we move on?
Yeah, I would just comment that our Roman symbols have to do with the Roman Republic and freedom, and the ideals of freedom which we have from the Roman Republic, which is not from Roman imperialism at all. That we don't have a czar. The Russians and the Germans do borrow from the Roman imperial time, but we borrow from the time before Caesar, before the Julius Caesar. And to our founding fathers, Julius Caesar was the villain who destroyed history, and that's why when you read the Federalist Papers and other patriotic literature, sometimes they address themselves as Brutus. Brutus was the believer in freedom in ancient Rome who participated in killing Caesar. So that's important to understand.
That is an important point. Here's our last caller. We're down to the last 90 seconds or so. Paul in New Jersey. Good morning, Paul.
Hello, gentlemen. Jeff, you're right along there with Al Gore in getting things wrong. About 15 years ago, he said there would be no snow anymore, and the Arctic ice sheets would melt. Here it is. I looked you up on YouTube, and there you are telling a crowd of people that in 5 years, mostly everybody would be dead, and you did that back in about 2011, saying that we would all die by either a Russian nuclear war. And this is a very Christian thing, where they always think the apocalypse is coming, and guess what? The apocalypse doesn't come, and everything's just fine.
Okay, Paul, thank you for your call. We'll have Jeff respond. We're almost out of time. Jeff, you got a quick response?
Yeah, I always had a rule never to make such a prediction, and I guess I got a little ahead of myself back then.
That's dangerous stuff.
That's the only time I make, never make predictions, especially about the future. But, I was pretty upset about Obama being elected, and it looked pretty bleak because he was disarming the U.S. And I don't know how much time
in 2008. Yeah, in 2008, things did look pretty bleak. Jeff, thank you, sir. We'll have you back next week. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's it for the day, ladies and gentlemen. Get your medical supplies, your energy cleaning, your essential oils now while you can, your firearms ammunition. Never, ever give up your guns. Please do have a fun, safe, productive day. And God bless America.